History Month in the US. I thought it would be good to talk about the black dollar because it's an important topic. Today I'd like to talk to you about it because it has great historical significance and a unique history. During this talk, I'm going to take you on a historical journey about what the black dollar actually means. Okay, so when I said I was going to do this talk, I got asked, what is the black dollar? So for those of you sitting here wondering what it means, it is the economic impact that black businesses have had in America in providing business opportunities through entrepreneurship and having the circulation of the dollar through the black community and how it is used. Or, but very simply, the money that black people spend in America. The history of the black dollar is an educational story of hardship, racism, and the valiant effort of black civil rights activists in the face of discriminatory laws, such as housing and schooling segregation in the United States. Behind me are some statistics. An Asian dollar circulates in its community for a month. The Jewish dollar circulates for 20 days, but the black dollar only circulates for 6 hours. For a people which has a spending power of 1.2 trillion and has a great influence over the trading market, how did this happen and how did we get to this point? Today I'd like to explain that to you and what we can do to change the situation for the better. Okay, so our story starts in the year of 1619 when the slave trade began. The slave trade was the nucleus for economic and racial injustice, as the nature of the trade was free labor, which generated no money for slaves. Although the trade was seen as racially motivated, and indeed it was also economic. Through this free labor, many buildings and architecture built in the United States were built by slaves and the manufacturer was profitable. But the start of the black dollar began in 1621. This was when slaves gathered some money, some because they were paid some little money by their slave owners and bought land. They became self-sufficient, selling their own tobacco and cotton. This progressed to 1700 by African Americans partnering up with Native Americans to learn their language. But each year, demand for these raw materials increased, and the slave population increased from 250,000 to 4 million in a matter of years, to provide a seemingly endless demand for materials. So in the 1800s, black people made 63 cents on the dollar. Can anyone guess what they make on the dollar today? Anyone get a rough estimate? Yeah.
80 cents per dollar.
No, it's 67 cents. So in 150 years, we've made a 4-cent increase on the dollar. That's very little progress. The difference between then and now is African Americans like Harriet Tubman rejected these wages. However, today, African Americans are accepting of this. Fast forward to 1934. The National Housing Act was created. Through this, neighborhoods were redlined. The practice of redlining was a discriminatory act in which the government allowed the Federal Housing Administration to let the Homeowners Loan Corporation to create residential security maps. They outlined the level of security for real estate investments in 239 cities around the United States. As you can see from the map behind me, high-risk areas were outlined in red. Minority areas were deemed high risk, even though there was minimal crime. They were outlined in red and hence redlined in these maps. These were typically residential areas where African American people lived, meaning that banks would deny all mortgage capital to people living within them. This impacted the black dollar heavily, as there was no business investment within them, causing the black dollar to become devalued. This economic disadvantage meant there was often a reliance on other communities, but there was one place in which the black dollar thrived, Black Wall Street. Malcolm X once said, when you spend your money outside of your community, you help empower the community in which you send your money, but you make poorer the community in which you live. This is remarkably true. People were not willing to fight for economic equality as they did civil rights, because it was not as feasible and obvious to see, as on the surface, their life had been improved by them spending outside of their communities. An example of a successful African American community was Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street was founded by a wealthy landowner called Ottawa W. Gurley and was heavily invested in by Booker T. Washington. Black Wall Street was located in the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Black Wall Street was a thriving area full of black-owned businesses which were incredibly successful. This community excelled through the amazing contributions of African Americans. Through this, a peaceful trading community was created. It was a cosmopolitan city and was self-sufficient, with black-owned banks, restaurants, houses, and theaters. Sadly, their great economic success still made them vulnerable to racism, as the success of Black Wall Street made local white residents nearby jealous of its economic prosperity. As in 1921, one of the worst massacres in United States history occurred. and rocked race relations for years to come. White residents embarked on a reckless terrorist attack which destroyed and damaged the community of Black Wall Street, killing 300 people, leaving 9,000 people homeless, 1,200 buildings destroyed, and $100,000 of property and robbing, and injuring many more. This is a picture of Black Wall Street before the attack. And next will be a picture after the attack. Because Black Wall Street was so heavily industrialized, it was seen as a threat to white-dominated American capitalism because it was an affluent, developing African-American community. Okay, hands up if you've watched Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Okay, so a lot of you. Well, I have something to add to that. Did you know Martin Luther King had another dream that is less talked about than his revolutionary civil rights movement? Martin Luther King dreamed of economic equality. He believed it was essential for African Americans to have that. It sounds good to think of, right? The reason it's so difficult to achieve is because it would mean completely reconstructing the American capitalist system. King said at a rally, 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. Justice in this sense was both a protection from segregation lists and access to that vast ocean of material prosperity, also known as corporate America. He was well aware of the struggle posed economically to African Americans, but only the dream part of the speech persists in American national history. White Americans clung to the King's emphasis on the content of character because the Fraser Pitter argued for a colorblind society, deflecting attention from the racial injustice engineered into the American economic system. At his 1960